Okay, kids, it's lunchtime. 2022 is here. So this is the Celestial Chatter for January 3rd through the 9th. Once again, the muses danced lively during that, what normally would have been the sleep zone last night. Both time and timelessness vied for my attention. We, in our normal human pursuits, have been trained to live by the clock, with each hour occupying usually 60 minutes. What if, during this season of the year, we might consider a unique increment to the march of days? For the moment, we will still hold on to the 24-hour day, but the hours might be seen to drift by on a different wave pattern. In the winter, our planet is as far away from the sun as it gets, with the northern hemisphere leaning at the 23 degrees 37 minutes further away than the southern half of our globe. Ponder, if you will, a scenario where the length of day is divided into dark and light portions that are not equal, and yet still maintain an hourly increment as 1/12 of each segment. This would alter the length of each hour to being much longer during the extended cold winter nights, and likewise a compression of the 12 daylight time slots. In this scenario, we would have a short daylight hours and very long nighttime hours. Add to this the distance above and below the equator, and the further north one lived, the longer would be the stretch of each hour of night. I hear there are places in the circumpolar region that barely receive 4 hours of dim daylight per each 24-hour time slot at this time of year. That would translate into increments of 20 minutes passing for each clock hour of daylight for a daytime slot. Now, basically, that means that during those 4 hours of daylight, each 12-hour slot would actually only occupy about 1/12 of that, or 20 minutes. Very fast hours. And vice versa. The night clock hours would stretch to each encompass 1.6 hours of clock time, stretching those hours out, making the night much longer in the hours that we usually are accustomed to. All at once, I find myself in some location off planet, able to observe the spinning globe. Winter has wrapped its arms around the northern hemisphere, and the bright side of the planet is a much narrower band of brilliance. As I am drawn ever closer to the planet's surface, I can see a stark alteration of the rhythm of nature here in the north. Other than the scurrying around of human endeavors, much of the natural world is moving in slow motion, as if withdrawn unto itself. A term flashes us across the screen of my consciousness: reflection. There is a deep and abiding sense requiring moments to ponder purpose. As the muses spun my thoughts and dreamscape down paths of where this might lead, hours stretch into days and days into weeks and then into years as the millennia unfolded both behind and before me. In the short lifespan of a human, not so much accomplishment in the grand scheme of things is going to transpire. 2,000 years ago, our ancestors were refining the agricultural lifestyle with expanding human settlements. 200,000 years ago, we foraged for our survival and lived in small wandering groups. In the most recent 200 years, our appetites for acquisition of earthly resources have been trained to be insatiable. We begin the year 2022, and the writing on the wall, as my soul peered over the coming horizon for 20, 200, or just 2,000 years ahead, foresaw a requirement for substantial alteration of our current trajectory. At this point, the Muses pointed out that to see time as I learned to define it in this unfolding matrix is perhaps not the wisest course to follow. There are a few trees that still exist on the surface of our planet that began prior to the shift from the BC era to the CE era, around 2,000 years ago. Our soul inhabiting human form for a short season, our soul inhabiting human form for a short season to learn lessons on the earth plane has been about this process forever. The soul, a spark of life essence, arrives in each incarnation, often with a minimal intact memory of previous incarnations. But this is not always the case. The Muses curtail this line of thought, and I am energetically projected into the zone of space within which the Earth and the other celestial bodies of our solar system are cycling in somewhat predictable paths around that fiery core that gravitationally holds them together. I am made aware that there is a council comprised of these extraterrestrial beings, the planets, each serving a function in a very long sequence of energetic direction, offering guidance for those willing to participate with them. I'm invited to sit with this council, and immediately the insignificance of tuning into the details of any longer cycle is refined into the vitality of living in the current moment. I am flooded with the awareness of animism, shifting into shamanism, and the course of the soul that is living in the moment, discovering everything that is required is usually present. This does not always paint a rosy picture of how we might hope things will work out, as some lesson plans are like very coarse sandpaper, attempting to shave off our rough edges. The Muses snap me back into the planetary council, and astrology that is shamanic is being discussed in the context of animism as a reminder to always recognize life force as present in everything. The essence of soul emerges as I perceive the uniqueness of each soul present in this council, and at the same time recognize the magic that transpires when we can open up our soul portals to discover the changing lesson plan as our soul is allowed to interact with other souls to combine energies into new functions. In the zone of interface, transpiring amongst the council, I become aware of a stillness wherein listening, or perhaps it is a willingness to hear between the thoughts, a calling for soul present, unlike anything I have witnessed to date. When wandering the field of shamanism, one discovers our energetic bodies have very little limitation of dimension. As I get ready to leave the council, I discover a vast array of size changes available as I alter my boundaries from large to larger to engage in a honi with each celestial presence, forehead and nose conjoined as energy moves between us. I begin with Pluto and am enveloped in a zone of intense and dynamic changes as parts of what I have known dissolve away to provide space for creation to expand. Next, Neptune expands our shared consciousness, and limitations of all sorts dissolve as if they never existed, and a large expanse of possibility seems to project out in all directions. Uranus beckons, and our kindred spirit erupts with unexpected delight as the false foundations crumble below us, and an awakening transpires toward potential, waiting recognition. There is a quickening as Chiron seems to carry messages that at one moment might portray limitation and the next erupting into enlightened euphoria as the human healing balm is allowed to flow unabated. Saturn peers deeply as we are eye to eye in a focus of control with a purpose and practicality. In one moment, the Saturn seems to attempt to contain things, only in the next to release its tight grip to allow growth to transpire. Jupiter, oh, largeness thou that thou art, seems to express that containment has no place, and yet there is a vision forming of direction, beckoning more participation in every far-reaching zone of interface. Mars can hardly contain himself with a vibrant energy, seeming to on the verge of exploding at any moment, seeking to launch in multiple directions simultaneously. Earth and Moon conjoined in a fluctuating orbital pattern beckon for human soul evolution to discover purpose that far exceeds much of the current Earth plane plight, infused with feeling and senses cued to a dynamic of maturity. Venus embraces us in a hug so complete that it seems as if our oneness is everything. Mercury, in one moment, spawns tales that would go on forever, and in the next weaves a joke into the story. Or was it? Flying into the solar core, we erupt into a searing burst of energy radiating throughout the cosmos, as if to say, gather round, friends. If you can stand the heat, here in the core of everything, there is an essence of presence, more like a reflection of cosmic oneness or boldness, a being that infiltrates and embraces everything. Individuality, yes, but only as a stepping stone to engage participation with every other creature and presence. I typed that previous paragraph with my eyes closed so as to capture the essence of the energy transpiring as each in the council imparted wisdom to share. I'm adding a section in here that I don't normally include in my weekly things, and this one has to do with the moon, because the moon's going to be very busy for this next week. So before doing that lunar consideration, there are factors in play that our moon currently must lay before us. This is the declination or latitude shifting process of north and south trajectory. It weaves on its circling path around the planet. There are lines of demarcation at 23 degrees 37 north and south of the equator that can be seen on a global map indicated as the tropics of Cancer in the north and the Tropic of Capricorn in the south. These lines represent the apparent maximum distance north or south of the equator the Sun and Saturn never travel beyond in relation to the Earth's rotation. Any other planet can weave a trajectory that on occasion does wander beyond those tropic lines of latitude. When this transpires, they are said to be out of bounds, OOB. Our closest satellite, the moon, goes through spells where it can wander these out of bounds zones, and sometimes this pattern lasts for years. During the 2020s is one of those timeframes, with the up and down movement causing the moon to travel these unpredictable zones for a few days every 2 weeks. We begin 2022 with the moon out of bounds until January 4th. The next lunar out of bounds will transpire between January 14th and 18th. I bring this up as this can flavor how we play our capacity to listen to our inner instincts, needs, attachments, and ancestral memories. The symbol of the moon, two arcs of consciousness, one inside the other, or a listening to our own inward being, soul. The potential for insight to wander along unique investigative tracks while out of bounds is enhanced a bit more during the 2022 every couple weeks. Excuse me, during the 2020s. Now, getting down to the mundane matters. Each week the moon travels, hang on a second. Okay, I'm gonna bring up the chart because having the chart on hand for this particular part of the consideration we'll find handy. So now getting down to mundane matters. Each week the moon travels a quarter of the way around the chart. You can kind of see it right up here in Capricorn right now. And in a week, it travels a quarter of the way around the chart, which means that well, as it's doing this, and there's an extension to the backdrop that it is the zodiacal flavor of the celestial universe surrounding us, or the 12 energy fields. So this week was initiated by the new moon out of bounds on Sunday. And you can kind of see, this is a little after it because this is the next day. Actually, this is almost 12 hours, or maybe even a little bit further than that later. Anyway, the new moon in Capricorn, and then she will travel around as she increases in size, because the moon is going to start getting larger. We won't see it for probably a couple of days or a day some. And if you live up here in the Northwest where it's raining or snowy or whatever it is, you won't see it at all for a while. But trust me, it is increasing in size until finally at the end of this week, it's going to land in Aries and it will be there for a couple of days. So the trajectory set in Capricorn for this lunar cycle at the new moon should indicate purpose and practicality with a unique out-of-bounds twist inspired by our position in whatever organizational field we find ourselves. During this upcoming week, the moon will conjoin briefly with 6 of the 10 planets and Chiron. In the wee hours of Monday, which is the chart that you see before you, Venus retrograde embraces the moon. There they are, see, right next to each other, as an energy initiation for us to tune into. Since Venus is retreating in retrograde, we may feel some level of concern for those along our path we may not have treated as well as we had hoped. Next, Pluto. Is greeted by the moon on Monday morning. And perhaps there are matters on the home front requiring some smoothing out if ruffled feathers exist. Maybe our grasp of aspects of our connection to the parents and family that are being redefined are on the table. As we enter into the evening cycle, I'm moving this ahead 6 hours at a time. The moon and Mercury do a jig in early Aquarius. Might there be a story to tell or refined? Lord knows our thoughts are keen to invent scenarios we likely may only have dreamt about. About mid to late morning on Tuesday, the moon catches up with Saturn in Aquarius. Could those inspired dreams of yesterday now be seeking some form of structure to fill out? Or maybe we will have to invent this ourselves. As the evening of Wednesday rolls around, move the chart ahead here to Wednesday. Okay, as the evening of Wednesday rolls around, the moon shifts from Aquarius into Pisces, where it is immediately greeted by Jupiter. Perhaps there are deeper ramifications to what we have felt transpiring since the new moon, and Jupiter is never at a loss for expanding on everything it is involved with. But Pisces, ruled by Jupiter, is not a simple walk in the park expedition. What might that lunar directive bring to the table for Jupiter to cast into the sea of possibility? Remember, you are only limited by your imagination. This might be an appropriate evening to set some intentions for utilizing your dream time, to ponder some profound considerations. Be prepared to take notes, either during the night or first thing when you awaken. The next lunar encounter will be with Neptune. In the wee early morning of Friday, while still navigating the deeper waters of Pisces. Oh, did I mention the depth of the oceanic sphere to plunge into that Pisces represents? Neptune poses an invitation for participation into zones of potential confusion on one level, yet just as likely can spawn ascent toward lofty goals of inspired aestheticism. One thing to always keep in mind when traversing the seas of Pisces is that we are in the zone of preparation for the next beginning or initiation process, where we are offered the opportunity to plant the refined seeds we have nurtured for newness to sprout. This brings us to late on Friday. When the moon crosses the threshold into the field of Aries, the land of beginnings. I would throw in here that Mars, as the ruler of Aries, is still traversing up here in the field of Sagittarius. We might expect to aim for some lively dreams that may take us to distant places we have not been before. Restlessness is not out of the question for this evening's dream cycle. As the afternoon of Saturday arrives, the moon combines its energy with Chiron. If we were to contemplate the seed scenario again, this may be a time to invest energy with tending to your garden of possibilities. Is it healthy? And are you providing the correct nutrients of attitude? Will your growing awareness, plant, sustain any semblance that can provide healing into your world? Because of Chiron's elliptical orbit, it can spend from 2 to as much as 8 years in different signs of the zodiac. In Aries, it is at its maximum for 8 years. The wounded healer is often portrayed with a leaning toward the wounds that each of us encounter as part of where it was in the celestial surround when we were born. The healing often is left to its own devices because in our modern civilization, that is something left to the medical profession. Have you ever heard the expression, physician, heal thyself? You might find this extraordinary to contemplate, but healing is something that can only transpire within a willing individual or situation. Translate this and discover that you are your best doctor or otherwise. Next week, beginning with January 10th, the moon will continue from the middle of Aries. Only one planet left to cross paths with. That will be Uranus. We will consider it then. Well, nothing happens within a vacuum. And there are other celestial parts of the conversation transpiring this week to be aware of. Venus making its way back through Capricorn up here. See if we can get back to our starting date. We fly through the calendar. Venus, making its way back through Capricorn, forms a sextile with Neptune. Actually, yeah, as it's going backwards. So let's just advance this back to then. On Wednesday. Went back too far. Okay, there we are. Don't be too surprised if some either insight or confusion crosses your path on appropriate relationship or partnership matters. Sextiles actually can be beneficial as they occur between signs that do not confuse one another. There might be some challenge in this as our imaginations, Neptune in Pisces, have no limit. Being aware of this, one could aim to trim one's sails and steer a path that does not intentionally provoke others. Sometimes this can't be avoided, but keep in mind that the Venus in Capricorn may be potential partners or folks in so-called executive positions that are being poked. Race forward to the next aspect that I saw transporting, and that will be on Saturday. On Saturday, Venus retrogrades back to the face of the sun. See, there they are, both at 18 degrees of Capricorn. Are you up for the challenge of the sun or king or anyone in a position of authority if they come face to face with the potential reflection of their own technique of dealing with others? Might there have been situations in attaining your lofty position where others may have been steamrolled over to get what you sought? Might there be indications of what it means to be a wise elder creeping in around the edges of your awareness, as opposed to just being older and more in control? Ambition, while not all bad, can foster animosity with others if what you have attained comes at an increased cost to others. As the week closes on Sunday, finds Mercury in Aquarius, forming a sextile with Chiron in Aries. Mercury has no shortage of information at its avail for the creation of stories that can infuse us with inspiration to be more in tune with others on our wavelength. Perhaps the Chiron factor in action-oriented Aries could be utilized to embrace someone in need of community involvement rather than them living on the outskirts. Perhaps community could use a healer with enough capacity to enhance synergy within the group. It is the story we are fabricating and living into it that sets in motion the experiences that will cross our path along the way. That's all I have for looking at this next week. It is actually quite a bit. You may want to listen to it more than once. And I release you, and stay tuned because we will be back next week. And have yourself a very delightful New Year's, because this is coming out before New Year's. So you can look again at that new moon that's transpiring this Sunday on the 2nd. And keep in mind, I didn't mention it last week, but that the moon is out of bounds for this particular new moon, which, adds a twist to the experience of what it is that we're being invited to embrace as we set our intentions for this next lunar month ahead. So ciao for now, and I will see you on the other side. Bye.